Hello and welcome ADR participants. We are thrilled to have you with us for another one of our video sessions before we're meeting virtually in person in January. This topic is fundraising and we have two great panelists for you. The first one is Sarah Fireherm.
Hi, thanks Shana. Hi everybody. As Shana said, I'm Sarah Fireherm. I am the Vice President for Student Affairs at Washington College in Chestertown, Maryland, and I am the ADR. I did start my career at Washington College in the athletic department, and then once I moved into Student Affairs, I've been lucky enough to now have athletics as part of my portfolio, and attended the ADR Institute a couple of years ago. I'm going to let my colleague Susie Chase introduce herself.
Hi there, I'm Susie Chase. I am actually a graduate of Washington College, where I am privileged to now be back working for. I'm also a parent of a Washington College lacrosse player, and I have been here for about 2 years, back at Washington College for about 2 years in the role of Vice President for Advancement and Alumni Relations. And before that, I was actually with US Lacrosse for about 8 years. So I'm really delighted to be back and having a conversation about athletics today.
So Susie, as you mentioned, you've been back on campus for a couple of years, and you and I have worked for a couple of those years working on several initiatives around raising funds. But as you think about what advice you might give, what would you say to ADRs, and what is it you think they need to know, just sort of on a high level about athletic fundraising?
Well, first of all, fundraising isn't brain surgery, so I don't think anybody should be intimidated by it. And I certainly think it's something that by the time you've reached your position, you've all had a little bit of association with, but probably feels like a little bit of a foreign object at the same time. There's a lot of things that I think in a senior athletic position that you should be thinking about with fundraising. But first of all, I think you should be establishing a strong relationship with your advancement department. Too often, the athletic priorities become subjugated to other goals within the institution. And so developing a strong relationship with the advancement team and really understanding the art and science of what's happening over there can be really critical to an athletic department's success, and making sure that you are staying high within the institutional priorities. We all know that athletics really can be such a fundamental tool to a healthy institution, from helping to drive enrollment, to strong student culture, to really strong philanthropy. And it's really important for an ADR, athletic directors and coaches, to understand and have a relationship that is well formed, and a lot of processes that are strong between those departments. You know, a lot of relationships will start with athletics, and as donors progress up the pipeline, what you don't want to happen is to have them disappear into institutional priorities. And so if your strategic plans are clear, understood, and the impact of them are really well understood by the advancement team, and how they can leverage a larger gift because of somebody's passion and affinity for athletics, you're really becoming a critical part of the overall advancement process. So I just, you know, my strongest advice would be, don't let your operations get siloed. Really focus on how can we work together, and how can everybody be team players here? Because in so many ways, athletics is strongly moving the institutional enrollment goals, fundraising goals, student culture goals forward.
That's great. Thank you. That's great advice for our ADRs. So Sarah, question for you as an ADR in this space. When you're sitting down with your AD around fundraising, what are you talking about? What are you checking in about? What are important things to make sure that you guys are discussing as an ADR with your AD?
Yeah. and Susie referenced this. I try and stay at a fairly high level with my athletic director. We have an athletic strategic plan that we're about 2 years into. So we try and connect everything we're talking about with that plan, from what our goals are, to how we're going to use the fundraised money in any given year, as opposed to our operating money. So we, again, I try and stay at a fairly high level with him, but at the same time, we also talk about how individual coaches, what they may be doing, what their relationships are like with their alums, and to make sure that our coaches are aligned with our overall athletic fundraising strategy. You certainly don't want coaches going rogue and going off and making asks of donors without having that coordinated with advancement. But I think that, and I don't, athletics has a fundraising goal every year. They do. They set that. You will find that, and you know this, that people in athletics tend to, they like having concrete goals. And in many cases, they will set goals that are difficult to achieve, which is great. And that certainly happens with us. So part of my conversation with him too, is actually to talk about what's realistic, what's a reach, which we should always be shooting for, but what's realistic. And I think the other thing that we always keep in mind is how do we have a sort of coherent strategy about how we are raising funds for this department and for our student athletes, more so than how are we raising funds for this particular team. We have to keep an eye on certainly Title IX and making sure that we are treating all of our athletes fairly, and that our fundraising reflects that as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Those are great points, Sarah. So Susie, one thing that Sarah talked about were setting goals for fundraising. And I'm curious from your perspective, kind of what the best practice is around, having those goals come from athletics, or is that a conversation between development or advancement and athletics and the ADR? Obviously, I would imagine advancement wants to know what those goals are. But can you talk a little bit about kind of setting fundraising goals for athletics and the best practices for that?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I think there's a couple different ways you want to think about this. First of all, you want to make sure you've got what I would say your operational nut covered and prioritized, right? So there's a couple ways that operational cost of your program is going to be fed. It's going to be fed off the revenue that comes off your endowment. So if you're fortunate to have a strong endowment within the athletics department, some of your coaching positions head coaching positions endowed, some of your departments endowed, that's obviously going to provide you annual revenue that is going to be critical to just your ongoing operational budget. In addition to that, you're going to have the money that the college is going to support directly from their operational budget every year. And then you're going to have the gap, which is what's going to come from fundraising. So, that's really that's where you're starting with your base goal. Okay, so this is what we need fundamentally to cover our program costs this year. We know we're getting X from the endowment. We know that X is coming sort of fuel from the institution proper. And then this is what we need to really run the program the way we think it should be run. And then what I always say is, what's blue sky on top of that? So that's where your aspirational goals come in. And that blue sky might start to look like, hey, we need a tennis bubble for 4 new courts because we want to be able to hold NCAA championships there. Or we need a new turf field hockey field. Or, we'd really like to add on a golf team, or we're really looking at expanding in this way. That can't be an ad hoc conversation. That has to be something that you have strategic buy-in from not only the athletic department, but within the leadership of the college and the board leadership, right? So you're not going to get your advancement team to prioritize raising money for those initiatives without having buy-in from leadership. And the best way to have that buy-in is have a really well communicated strategic plan that showcases how athletics is going to move the needle with enrollment and with philanthropy and with the campus culture and with student health and wellness. So the expansion of those programs, you have some clear metrics points that you can communicate back to really create that sense of buy-in, why those additional components are so important. So really fundamentally, you should have two goals. You should have, hey, here's our operational nut, that's the base that we want to cover. And here's our stretch goal, because we know that we want to add these capital projects on, and we want to do this. And that may be that's not just going to be an annual fundraising target. That's going to be like in best practices, that's going to be like a 3 to 5 year project that you're looking at. That doesn't need to be part of a fully baked capital campaign. I think oftentimes athletic initiatives can stand and shine alone if they're done as a mini project, right? Because you can really galvanize the attention and the enthusiasm of your athletes and your affinity base there if it really is a standalone. So I think there's two ways you want to do that, right? You want to prioritize operational, and then you also want to set your blue sky strategic plan fundraising objectives.
That's great. Thank you. And I think that answer also really highlights kind of where that ADR role is as far as kind of driving those strategic pieces and getting that institutional leadership buy-in. That's a great kind of nugget to sit with the ADR, where the AD is managing a little bit lower with the coaches. So that's awesome. Thank you.
I think if you think about division of responsibilities as the ADR, you really want to gravitate towards that blue sky, that strategic vision of keeping everybody pushing forward, and the AD needs to be really focused on the practical and tactical, right? So the AD is building that pipeline through the operational to bring them and lead them up towards investing in that strategic vision. So you can really work hand in glove that way, and it can be such a complement to the overall advancement strategy of your institution.
And obviously we are on Zoom. The participants here are virtual, so we know that things are a little bit different than years past. I'm interested really from both of your perspectives, but starting with you, Susie, from a big picture perspective, what current challenges and trends are you seeing in fundraising generally at institutions given these current times?
Well, shockingly, philanthropy across the nation really hasn't plummeted, right? I think, first of all, the stock market performance has been strong. So the individuals who have the greatest inclination to give have really leaned into that and understand that the institutions that they support really need them now. So we can't shy away from advancement and from raising money right now because of what's going on with the pandemic. I think in many ways, this is the time for us to double down. And those of us who are going to double down and really commit to, hey, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to come out sharper, better, stronger, faster, are the really those of us who are going to come out ahead of the pack, right? And I've been amazed to hear some colleges and institutions are saying, hey, we're sort of shutting fundraising operations down. I would dramatically disagree with that. I respect it, but I would just disagree with that point of view. I think, especially for athletics, to have a quiet campus and to have student athletes who are so hungry and so missing being involved and engaged with those programs presents the perfect case for why investing in athletics is so important. The absence of it tells that story in a really powerful way. And the way that athletic communities led by coaches and athletic directors have created these little microcosms for students to keep them engaged and connected with their institution has blown me away. And I think the only thing we haven't done as a trend well is translate that and tell that story about what's happening and say, look at the power of this and look at how amazing this is, what's happening. And, you know, who cares about playing time when this powerful experience is happening with your student athlete, because they're part of this community that is keeping them involved in a way that is really special in a really trying time. So that doesn't really speak to national trends, but it does speak to what the opportunity is within this strange time for athletic programs, right? You know, as I said initially, the biggest shocking trend is that philanthropic support has not decreased. We don't anticipate that, really. The reality, the unfortunate reality, is that those who've been hit hardest by the pandemic is not the top 1% of our nation in terms of economic wealth, right? So those who can give are and should be, I would say. So don't take your foot off the gas right now.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I can see why Sarah recommended you for this role and why you are so successful about it. I do not have a tie to Washington College, but you got me motivated in
Good.
athletics and kind of the place that they play on campus. So I appreciate the time. Sarah, do you have any additional questions that you think would be great for ADRs to hear?
If there's one thing that I would sort of finish with, you can hear, you know, as Susie talks about this level of optimism that is so important now from us in leadership positions. So as an ADR, your athletes and your former athletes are really more than ever valuing their experience because of what has sort of been taken away from them temporarily. And they are really thinking about how important that was to them and that is to them. Their parents are thinking the same thing. So as we really think about how we move forward from this place in history, it really depends upon this. This is the time to sort of re-articulate the value, especially of that Division III athletic experience, because such a large percentage of our current students and our alums had a varsity athletic experience. That's not the case with your really large Division I institutions. So more than ever, that experience is really going to be powerful, and using that as your platform to really work on developing and as Susie said, not taking your foot off the gas around fundraising for your athletic program, because you know what the value of it is, and all of your alums and your student athletes know what the value is.
That is a great point.
And there are just a couple, you know, points circling back to sort of your first question about, you know, that what should an athletic department in general know about fundraising? And I think, you know, one of the things that is too often missed within, especially Division III colleges, is that there's not a specialized athletic fundraising position. And I would advocate very strongly for that, because that is a placeholder, and it sets the signal within the institution that you prioritize athletic fundraising, that you understand the importance of it. And the other thing I would say is to coaches and athletic directors and ADRs is, don't assume that the advancement office is thinking about you. I hate to say that, but B, don't be afraid to push them and say, hey, this is a good idea. We should be doing this. We should be doing a rowing reunion. We should be doing, you know, an alumni parent reunion around that 1998 NCAA championship event. You've got great ideas. You've got great experiences, and athletics is so much the heartbeat of a college campus that you can really lead up. You know, don't sit and wait for them, because in some places you may sit for a long time, right? So don't do that. And I'm not trying to be disparaging of advancement people, but just there's a lot of priorities, right? And if you don't say loud and clear, this needs to be a priority, and this is why. And have your facts and your figures to back it up, because you know that adding that sport is going to bring X number of students to campus. It's going to cost Y. It's going to, you know, it's going to generate this. And I think if you can do that, you're just much better served.
That's great. Thank you. I really appreciate this. And you all have given, I think, the ADRs a lot to think about, even as someone that used to be on campus in athletics, a lot to think about at a time where we're not able to showcase kind of the big wins on the field or on the court. It really does push us to tell the story of why athletics is so important. And I think that's what fundraisers do really well. So now is probably a time, just as you said, Susie, as good a time as ever to partner together and tell that story about the student athlete experience, and not kind of depend on just, you know, the big football win to bring some dollars in the door. But we can really capitalize on this moment as people are recognizing how much they're missing that experience.
We only have 4 years as parents too to watch our kids on those fields. So don't forget that the students are not the only ones who are missing this, right? Your parents, and during the time their kids are on those fields, they want to make a tangible impact in that student experience. So, you know, put clear tactical objectives in front of them. If you've got needs that are clear, put them in front of them. Parents will make it happen. You know, they don't want their kids to not have the best tennis balls and the best shells and the best of everything, because, you know, we as coaches, you all know this, like, and for bad or good, those parents are playing in many cases right along there with their kids.
Oh, yes.
So
yeah. Well, and you were just giving me thought, like, now is the time to approach the parents and say, look, I'm sorry it's been a crappy 2 years. Like, what can we do together to make sure the senior year, or the one remaining year, is the best it's going to be? Let's send them on a trip. Let's do something, right? Like, that's ripe for the taking for those kind of upcoming seniors.
yeah, and I'm sorry I keep talking, but there's
no, this is great.
As a parent, I think, and from an athletic department thing, you really got to think about, like, what is your best and highest ask, right? So, like, I love the swag. Like, I love it when the college store is open and I've got 1 million Colgate lacrosse specialized, or Washington College lacrosse, you know, specialized t-shirts where my children played. But, you know, and you've got parent groups that are sending that out to raise money for the team. And then you got the oranges sale that the kids are in the chocolate bars, the kids, like, I know that these are all the things that Division III schools have to do because we're not Division I and we're not, you know, sponsored. Well, actually, Colgate is Division I, and we still did that. So, but
the TV contracts are less at those schools.
Yeah, just say that. But I would just say, like, sometimes you have to remember that there's a percentage of your families that are going to only have X as disposable income, right? And so, do you want it going to the swag sale? I'm not saying that might not be a really important factor of team culture, and you've got to make that decision. But where is the highest and best ask, right? So don't look at these as siloed operations, because you got to remember that all those things are coming to one family, right? So where do you want to put your powder? And you got to think about things like that. So it's really important, because if you've got a family that only has $100 to give, do you want them, like, spending that $100 just so, because they're going to do it to support by buying, you know, 50 I love my college pom-pom hats, or do you want them making a gift, right? But if you're making that gift, you better articulate where it's going.
That is a great kind of closing piece, as far as, and I think the ADR is, you can see the role that they would set in helping to determine those priorities in line with the AD, and then it's the AD's role, obviously, to communicate it down to the staff. So thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it. I know our participants will appreciate it as well. And they have gotten some great nuggets from you all. So thank you again. And I'm sure that if individuals have questions, we will be providing the ability to reach out specifically to Sarah, and as she's been a member of our planning team. So thank you for serving in that role as well.